It started with a vibration in the middle of the night. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was half asleep, groggy, when my wife's phone buzzed on the nightstand beside her. Normally, I wouldn't care. We both got work emails at odd hours. But something about the way she jolted awake, grabbed it fast, and angled the screen away from me, it made my stomach twist. It wasn't just the speed, though that was part of it. It was the panic in her movements, the way her body stiffened, and how she pressed the phone close to her chest like it contained a secret too fragile to risk being seen. I caught a glimpse. Just a few words, but enough to change everything. Can't stop thinking about you. Those 6 words shattered the version of my marriage I thought I had. I froze. I didn't sit up, didn't ask questions. My instinct told me to stay still, to breathe evenly, to pretend I was still asleep. My heart, though, it was racing so hard I was afraid she'd hear it in the silence of the room. I've been married to Emily for 11 years. We've had our ups and downs, arguments over money, stress from raising 2 kids, disagreements about how much time she spends on her phone. But never, not once, had I suspected her of cheating. If anything, she always struck me as the steady one, the dependable one, the person holding our little world together while I scrambled to keep up. And now here I was, lying next to her, feeling like a stranger. She typed something quickly in response. I couldn't see what. The glow of the screen lit her face for a moment, and I swear I saw her lips curve into the faintest smile before she turned the phone face down and slipped it under her pillow. Then she sighed, soft, content, like someone exhaling after reading good news. That sound gutted me, because when was the last time she'd sighed like that because of me? I didn't confront her then. Instead, I lay there in the dark, my body stiff, my mind spiraling. Who was texting her? How long had this been going on? And most of all, how did I miss it? Sleep was impossible. My thoughts were a storm. Images of her laughing at someone else's jokes, sneaking glances at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, maybe even meeting him somewhere while I was at work. They flooded in, each one stabbing deeper. Beside me, Emily drifted back into a peaceful sleep, her breathing steady, her hand tucked under her cheek like she didn't have a care in the world. And me? I stayed at the ceiling, wide awake, my chest tight. That was the night everything began to unravel. The next morning, she acted normal, too normal. She kissed me on the cheek before heading into the kitchen to make coffee, chatting casually about the kids' schedules and a work meeting she had later that day. I tried to respond in kind, but my words felt heavy, forced. I couldn't shake the image of that message burned into my brain. I watched her carefully, the way she kept her phone within arm's reach at all times, the way she tilted the screen slightly away whenever she checked it, the subtle smile that flickered across her lips once or twice when she thought no one was paying attention. Maybe if I hadn't seen that message, I would have brushed off these behaviors as paranoia. Maybe I would have told myself I was overthinking. But now, every little thing felt like confirmation. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Part of me hoped there was some innocent explanation. Maybe it was a coworker joking around. Maybe I misread the message in my half-asleep state. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance I hadn't seen what I thought I'd seen. But deep down, I knew. I knew because of the way my gut twisted when I remembered her smile. I knew because of the sudden distance I felt, even while sitting across from her at breakfast. And I knew because something in her eyes that morning looked different, brighter, livelier, like she was carrying around a secret that gave her energy. Not the kind of energy that comes from a good night's sleep. The kind that comes from feeling wanted, desired. And for the first time in my marriage, I wasn't sure I was the one making her feel that way. Sarah and I had been married for 9 years. We met in our mid-20s at a friend's barbecue in Chicago. I still remember that day vividly. Not because it was anything extraordinary. A small get-together in someone's backyard. Paper plates piled with burgers and potato salad. Beer bottles sweating in the July heat. But because of her. I was standing awkwardly by the grill, half listening to some guy talk about the Cubs, when Sarah walked in. She wasn't loud or trying to be the center of attention, but the energy around her shifted. She had this easy confidence, the kind that wasn't showy but impossible to ignore. She laughed at something one of her friends said, and it wasn't just polite, it was full, unrestrained, like she meant it. That laugh hooked me before I even said a word to her. We ended up next to each other at the drink table, both reaching for the same bottle of water. She smiled, apologized, and handed it to me. I made some lame joke about how I'd owe her one, and braced for the awkward silence that usually follows my attempts at humor. But instead of drifting away, she stayed. She asked what I did for work, where I grew up. Within minutes, it felt less like small talk and more like we were catching up after years apart. She was in marketing at the time, hustling in an agency downtown, full of ideas and stories about client meetings gone wrong. I was working in logistics, long hours, Lots of stress, not nearly as glamorous. I worried she'd find me boring, but she didn't seem to. She asked questions, laughed at my self-deprecating comments, and seemed genuinely interested. We clicked instantly. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Late-night phone calls that stretched until one of us dozed off mid-sentence. Weekend dates exploring neighborhoods in the city neither of us had been to. Cheap tacos, long walks, stolen kisses in the rain. It was the kind of romance that makes you believe in fate, even if you've never been the type. Within a year, we moved in together. 2 years later, we had the wedding, a small, intimate gathering with close friends and family. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. I can still picture her walking down the aisle, her eyes locked on mine, and thinking, this is it. This is the person I want forever with. A year later, we bought our first house in the suburbs, a modest 2-story with a yard big enough for barbecues and maybe, someday, kids running around. Someday came sooner than expected. Not long after settling in, Sarah told me she was pregnant. I'll never forget the way she held out the positive test, her hands trembling with excitement and nerves. I pulled her into a hug, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. When Jacob was born, everything shifted. Overnight, our lives became a cycle of feedings, diapers, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, convinced that providing financially was the best way to show my love. Sarah transitioned into remote freelancing so she could be home with Jacob, juggling conference calls with nap schedules, editing campaigns while rocking him in his bouncer. Our life became the definition of suburban routine. I'd commute into the city, fight through traffic, put in 10-hour days, and come home exhausted. Sarah handled the logistics of daily life, the grocery runs, daycare pickups, pediatric appointments, on top of her work. She was stretched thin, but she rarely complained. We fought sometimes, sure, mostly about money, or about how little time I seemed to have left for her and Jacob. She'd accuse me of prioritizing work. I'd fire back about the mortgage or bills. But the arguments never lasted long. We always made up, usually collapsing side by side on the couch after Jacob finally went down, too tired to keep the fight going. I thought we were solid. Mark, my best friend since high school, used to joke that Sarah and I were disgustingly stable. He'd roll his eyes when we held hands at parties or teased each other over nothing. You two make the rest of us look bad, he'd say, half serious. And honestly, I believed him. But looking back, maybe stable was just another word for stagnant. The truth is, our relationship shifted without me noticing. Slowly, quietly, in ways that didn't seem like much at the time. Sarah craved more connection, more conversation, more shared moments. I, on the other hand, was often too drained to give it. After dinner, I'd collapse in front of the TV, half watching whatever game was on. She'd retreat upstairs to work or scroll her phone, sometimes with the door to our bedroom half closed. We drifted, not in anger, but in silence. Jacob became our glue. We were at our best when we were parenting together, cheering at his soccer games, brainstorming ideas for his school projects, planning weekend trips to the park. Those moments gave us a sense of purpose, a shared goal. But when it was just the two of us, when the noise of parenting faded and it was only husband and wife, there was a growing emptiness neither of us seemed to know how to name. I told myself it was normal. Isn't that what happens in marriage? The honeymoon fades, passion dulls, and what's left is companionship. I figured we'd find our way back eventually. Maybe after work settled down, or once Jacob was older. But deep down, if I'm being honest, I ignored the signs. The way she'd ask about my day, and I'd answer in clipped, tired phrases. The time she suggested a date night, and I brushed it off, too exhausted to make the effort. The look in her eyes when she'd sit across from me at dinner, waiting for me to notice her new haircut or the book she was excited about, only to realize I was scrolling through emails again. Sarah stopped pushing after a while. She stopped asking, stopped trying, and I took her silence as acceptance, never realizing it was withdrawal. That's the thing about distance in a marriage. It doesn't come crashing in like a storm. It creeps, quiet, slow. You don't even notice it until suddenly you're standing on opposite shores, unsure how you drifted so far apart. By year 9, our routines ran like clockwork. Breakfast at 7:15, drop off at school, wake, dinner at 6 if traffic was kind, Jacob's bedtime story, then our own version of bedtime, which usually meant me zoning out in front of the TV while Sarah scrolled on her phone until she fell asleep. We weren't unhappy, exactly, but we weren't connected either. We existed side by side, like roommates sharing a mortgage more than soulmates sharing a life. I thought it was just part of marriage. That dulling of passion, that quiet distance. I figured we'd get through it, like everyone else. And maybe we would have, if not for the texts. The morning after I saw the message, I couldn't look at Sarah the same. She moved through her routine like nothing was wrong, packing Jacob's lunch, making coffee, reminding me to grab the dry cleaning. She hummed quietly while buttering toast, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing the old sweatshirt I'd bought her years ago. From the outside, it was the picture of normalcy. But for me, nothing was normal. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around my mug, barely hearing a word she said. My head was pounding with questions. Who was on the other end of that message? How long had it been going on? And, worst of all, how much of our marriage had been a lie? I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a friend at work being inappropriate. Maybe I'd misread the words in my half-asleep haze. Maybe she'd already shut it down and moved on. But that knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. Over the next week, I became hyper-aware. I noticed things I'd never noticed before, or maybe things I had, but brushed aside because I didn't want to see them. The way she smiled at her phone, just a quick upward curve of her lips before she caught herself. The way she set it face down the second I walked into the room. How she lingered in the kitchen after dinner, finishing up emails, her eyes darting to the glowing screen in her hand. It was like someone had turned up the brightness on all the little red flags I'd ignored. I hated myself for it, but I started watching her more closely. I noticed how often she kept her phone with her, on the counter while she cooked, on the bathroom sink when she showered, even tucked under her pillow at night. She'd never done that before. She used to leave it lying around the house, forgotten, but now it seemed glued to her hand. At night, when she lay beside me scrolling, the glow of the screen cast shadows across her face. I'd glance over, pretending to shift in my sleep, trying to catch a glimpse. Sometimes I saw nothing but work emails or Pinterest boards. Other times, the quick tap of her fingers and the way her lips curled into a half-smile made my stomach drop. I told myself I was imagining things. That paranoia was poisoning me. But the fear was louder than reason. One night, she fell asleep early on the couch. Jacob was already in bed, the house finally quiet. I was half watching TV, half listening to her soft breathing, when her phone buzzed on the cushion beside her. My heart pounded. I stayed at it like it was a live grenade. I knew what it would mean if I picked it up. I knew that once I crossed that line, there was no going back. But curiosity mixed with fear, and the weight of unanswered questions pressed too hard on my chest. I reached for it. No passcode. She trusted me. Or maybe she never imagined I'd check. The thread was right there at the top of her messages. Dozens of them. My hand shook as I scrolled. The words blurred through my tears. But I forced myself to read. Flirty. Intimate. Emotional. Things she hadn't said to me in years. I love how you listen to me. I can't wait until we're alone again. You make me feel alive. My throat closed. I scrolled further back. Jokes, inside references, long rants about her day that ended with him telling her she was amazing, that she deserved better, that he thought about her all the time. And then the name of the top nearly made me drop the phone. It wasn't some stranger. It wasn't a random coworker I'd never met. It was Daniel. Daniel, the guy from her marketing team. The guy she'd mentioned casually a few times over the years. Married. 2 kids. Would even had dinner with him and his wife once. I remembered sitting across from him at a restaurant, sharing beers and talking about sports while Sarah and his wife chatted about schools. He seemed harmless. Forgettable. Now, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor, the phone glowing in my hands. They hadn't slept together yet. Not physically, at least. But the intent was there. The planning. The longing. And in some ways, that cut even deeper. She'd given him the parts of herself that used to belong to me. Her jokes, her worries, her late-night thoughts. The intimacy of being truly seen. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. Every word was a knife, twisting deeper. I finally set the phone down on the sink and just stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes bloodshot. I barely recognized myself. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat there, silent, until my hands stopped shaking. That night, I climbed into bed beside her and pretended to sleep. My mind ran in circles. How could she? How long has this been going on? Was I that blind? 4 days. I said nothing. I went to work, came home, played with Jacob, and pretended everything was fine. On the surface, I smiled. I cracked jokes. I kissed Sarah goodnight. Inside, though, I was unraveling. I started second-guessing everything. Every smile, every touch, every I love you. Were they real? Or just cover for what she was hiding? When she hugged me, was she thinking about him? When she laughed at something I said, was she comparing me to him in her head? I became a stranger in my own life, moving through the motions while paranoia gnawed at me from the inside. At work, I couldn't focus. Numbers blurred on spreadsheets. Deadlines passed me by. My boss noticed, asked if I was okay. I lied, said I was tired. At home, I watched her like a hawk. Every time her phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Every time she smiled at the screen, I felt like my heart was being wrung out. I hated what I was becoming. Suspicious, angry, jealous. A man hiding in the shadows of his own marriage. But I couldn't stop, because now I knew. And once you know, you can't unknow. Even Jacob started to notice. One evening while we were building Legos together, he looked up at me with his wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Dad, why do you look sad?" I froze, forcing a smile I didn't feel, and told him I was just tired. But later that night, when I kissed him goodnight, I felt the sting of shame. My pain was bleeding into his world, and he didn't deserve that. Meanwhile, Sarah carried on as though nothing had changed. She laughed. She teased me. She kissed me on the cheek. But there was something different in her eyes. Something lighter, brighter. A spark I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't for me. And that realization broke me in ways I can't fully explain. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Thursday night. Jacob was asleep. Sarah was at the dining table, laptop open, phone beside her, typing away. I was on the couch, pretending to watch TV. But my blood was boiling. I couldn't sit there any longer, pretending to be blind. My chest felt like it would explode if I didn't say something. So I stood, walked over, and said her name. She looked up, surprised. "Yeah." My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Who's Daniel to you?" Her face went white. In that instant, I knew. It was a Thursday night when I confronted her. Jacob was at a sleepover, the house unusually quiet. That silence pressed in on me like a weight. Normally, evenings were filled with his laughter, the clatter of Legos, or the background noise of cartoons. But that night, there was nothing. Just the faint hum of the dishwasher and the sound of our forks scraping plates as we cleaned up after dinner. I couldn't keep it in anymore. The words had been burning in my chest for days, weeks even. My hands trembled as I dried a dish, and finally I blurted, "Sarah, we need to talk." She looked up, sensing something serious in my tone. Her eyes narrowed slightly, cautious. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the folder of screenshots I'd taken, proof I wished I didn't have, and slid it across the table toward her. Her face drained of color before she even touched the phone. Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching. You went through my phone." The audacity of her deflection snapped something in me. "Don't do that," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "Don't make this about me. What is this?" She didn't move. She just stayed at the screen, the blue glow reflecting off her wet eyes. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, tears welled up and spilled over. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Daniel and we just started talking. It felt harmless at first. And then, I don't know, I got carried away." Carried away? My voice cracked, equal parts fury and heartbreak. "You told him you can't wait to be alone with him. You told him he makes you feel alive. Do you have any idea what that does to me? To our marriage?" She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I was lonely. You're always working, always tired. I felt invisible. And then someone paid attention, and it felt good. I didn't go looking for it, but it happened." Her words cut deeper than the messages. Invisible. Good. Like I was a ghost in my own marriage, and some other man was the one making her glow. I wanted to scream, to slam my fist into the table, to throw something just to make her feel an ounce of the devastation swirling inside me. But I didn't. I sat there trembling, my teeth clenched, tears burning my eyes. "Did you sleep with him?" I demanded, my voice low but sharp. She shook her head immediately. "No, I swear. We never crossed that line." I studied her face, searching for a lie. The problem was, I didn't know if I could trust anything she said anymore. Every word out of her mouth felt tainted, like sugar poured into poison. "Then what was it? Sarah, tell me what it was." Her sobs quieted. She looked at me, mascara smudged, lips trembling. It was attention. It was someone listening when I spoke. Someone who asked how I was and actually cared about the answer. I know that sounds awful, but it wasn't about him. It was about me needing to feel like I mattered. And I didn't do that for you. My voice broke, the pain sharp and raw. She closed her eyes, her silence more damning than words. We argued for hours. I hurled accusations, about trust, about lies, about how she destroyed the very foundation we built. She defended herself in fragments, broken sentences through sobs. Sometimes she admitted fault. Sometimes she threw blame back at me, saying she felt neglected, like she was raising our son and living our life alone while I disappeared into work and exhaustion. At one point, she whispered, "I still love you. I want us. I want to fix this." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the damage was done. The fight ended not with resolution, but with silence. She curled up on the edge of the bed that night, her back to me, shoulders shaking. I lay on my side, staring into the dark, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life, even though the woman I married was less than 2 feet away. The weeks that followed were brutal. We lived like strangers under the same roof. Meals were eaten in silence, punctuated only by Jacob's chatter. We forced smiles for him, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending we weren't bleeding inside. But once he went to bed, the silence returned. Sometimes she tried to reach for me in small ways. A hand on my arm, a quiet goodnight. I flinched every time. Other times, I'd catch her crying alone in the kitchen, wiping her tears before Jacob saw. We started counseling because neither of us knew what else to do. Sitting across from a stranger in a softly lit office, we spilled fragments of our pain. Sarah admitted to the emotional affair. She admitted she liked how Daniel made her feel. But she swore again and again it never got physical. She swore she wanted our marriage more than anything. I sat stiffly in the chair, arms crossed, bitterness bubbling under the surface. I told the counselor that trust isn't something you just rebuild with an apology. That every time her phone buzzed now, I felt a knife twist in my chest. Some sessions felt productive. She cried. I raged. The counselor mediated. Other sessions felt like theater. Sarah playing the remorseful wife, me the wounded husband, both of us saying the right things without anything truly changing at home. At dinner, Jacob would tell us about his day, and we'd nod, smile, encourage him. He had no idea he was the only thing keeping us tethered together. But at night, when the house was quiet, the betrayal echoed too loud in my head. I'd stare at the ceiling, reliving the words she wrote to him. "You make me feel alive." And I'd think, so what am I? Dead weight. One night in therapy, the counselor leaned forward and asked me, "What do you need from Sarah to heal?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I opened my mouth, ready to answer, but nothing came out. My throat tightened. My chest ached. I realized, with crushing clarity, that I didn't even know. How do you heal from knowing the person you trusted most was secretly giving their heart to someone else? What could she possibly do or say that would make me stop picturing her smiling at her phone, waiting for Daniel's name to pop up? I sat there in silence, staring at the floor, while Sarah's tears slid down her cheeks. The counselor gave me time, but my silence spoke volumes. I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know if healing was even possible. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just at a crossroads. We were standing on opposite cliffs, the ground between us crumbling. It's been 2 years since that night. 2 years since I slid those screenshots across the table and watched my wife's face crumble. 2 years since my world tilted on its axis and nothing felt certain anymore. We didn't divorce, though there were months when I thought we would. In fact, there were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, silently rehearsing how I'd pack my things, how I'd tell Jacob, how I'd explain to my family and friends. There were mornings when Sarah sat across from me at the breakfast table, her eyes red from crying, and I felt like I was looking at a stranger. But we stayed. Not out of denial, not because it was easy, but because when everything fell apart, we both realized we weren't ready to let go. We committed to counseling, to brutal honesty, to tearing down and rebuilding. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Rebuilding trust felt like climbing a mountain with no summit. Every buzz of her phone triggered me. Every time she worked late, my chest tightened. Every time she laughed at something on her screen, my mind went racing back to him. In the early months, I asked for total transparency. Phone passwords, location sharing, immediate replies to texts. At first, it made me feel safer, but eventually it became suffocating, for both of us. I realized that no amount of surveillance could rebuild trust. I had to make a choice. Either believe her effort was real, or live in paranoia forever. Sarah, for her part, had to face herself too. She didn't just get to say sorry and move on. She had to do the work. Setting boundaries with coworkers, cutting contact with Daniel completely, blocking his number, quitting projects that put her near him. And more than that, she had to look at the deeper hole inside her that led her there in the first place. There were ugly fights. Nights when counseling sessions ended with slammed doors and bitter silence. Nights when she would sob, swearing she loved me, while I sat there frozen, wondering if love could ever be enough. But there were also small victories. Like the first time we went out to dinner, just the two of us, and managed to talk without circling back to the betrayal. Or the time Jacob made a silly joke and we both burst out laughing at the same time, realizing it had been months since we'd laughed together like that. Or the quiet evening when Sarah admitted, "I'm terrified every day that I broke something we'll never fix." And instead of lashing out, I reached across the couch and held her hand. Those moments didn't erase the pain, but they stitched us together, slowly, imperfectly. 2 years later, our marriage looks different than it did before. We carved out a new kind of relationship, one where nothing stays unsaid. We check in with each other daily, not just about schedules and chores, but about feelings, fears, even small irritations. It's awkward sometimes, but it keeps the silence from building walls between us again. I learned to show up differently, not just collapsing into the couch after work, but actually being present, listening when she talks, even if I'm tired, saying "I love you" and meaning it, not just as routine words before bed. Sarah, in turn, learned accountability. She doesn't brush off my insecurities, even if they seem irrational. She reassures me without resentment, understanding that rebuilding requires patience. She's also learned to catch herself when she starts to retreat emotionally, when she feels that itch to look elsewhere for validation. We're not perfect. Some scars never fade. There are still nights when I wake from a dream and, for a moment, I see that message again. "Can't stop thinking about you." It still stings. And there are times when Sarah notices my silence and knows without asking that I'm back in that memory. She'll put a hand on my shoulder, and I'll let myself exhale, reminding both of us that the past doesn't have to control the present. We're still here. Sometimes I think about those secret texts, the words that nearly ended us. They changed my marriage forever, but not just in the way I feared. Because those words didn't just expose betrayal. They exposed the truth we'd both been avoiding. The distance, the silence, the slow erosion of connection. We were partners in raising our son, but we weren't partners in each other's lives anymore. It's strange to say, but in some ways, we're stronger now than we were before. Not because of the betrayal itself. There's nothing romantic or noble about that pain. But because of what came after. The brutal honesty. The late-night conversations where we stripped ourselves bare. The choice, over and over again, to stay, to fight, to rebuild. I used to think strong marriages were about never breaking. Now I know strength is about breaking, and choosing to put the pieces back together anyway. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been betrayed too. Maybe you've seen messages that shattered your world. Maybe you're sitting in that same bathroom I once sat in, scrolling through words you wish you'd never seen, your hands shaking, your chest tight, wondering if your life will ever feel normal again. I won't lie to you, it's hell. It will break you in ways you didn't think possible. It will make you question everything, your partner, yourself, even love itself. But sometimes, in that devastation, there's also clarity. The chance to finally face the truth of what your relationship has become. The chance to decide, do we walk away, or do we stay and fight? Neither choice is easy. Neither is wrong. For us, staying meant years of work, tears, and setbacks. It meant confronting our own flaws, not just each other's. It meant realizing that forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make every day. If you choose to stay, know that it's possible to rebuild. Not to erase what happened. You can't. But to build something new in its place. Something rawer, more honest, maybe even stronger. And if you choose to walk away, know that there's strength in that too. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, enough. As for me, I'm still here, 2 years later, living a marriage that looks different than the one I thought I had. But one that, for all its scars, is real. Thank you for listening to my story. I have many more to share. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And let me leave you with this question. Have you ever felt stuck in a relationship where leaving felt impossible, but staying felt unbearable? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear them.